So, everybody, if this is not an interesting political development, I don't know what is. I became aware of this story thanks to a friend of ours named Birian Sondel, who has a great Substack that I recommend you all subscribe to. I'll put a link to it in the video notes here. He put out a post this afternoon called "What Insane Reality Is This? Marjorie Taylor Greene attacks AOC from the left." And that caught my eye, and so I figured it may have
I've
caught yours
said it
as well.
before. I will say it again. I don't even know what right and left mean anymore because of things like this.
Well, here's an example.
I don't even know what they mean.
A few years ago, when Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was occupying Nancy Pelosi's office with the Sunrise Movement, I would have said it would be insane for her to be attacked from the left by the far right. But this is now the reality we live in. Far-right nutjob Marjorie Taylor Greene, famous for her belief in Jewish space lasers, has outflanked AOC from the left.
There aren't Jewish space lasers. I have to tell you, as a Jew, I'm in on that.
I still want to get to the bottom of how exactly she got access to that lab.
The shiksas are not supposed to know about it.
That's the thing. With the money we pay for security down there, how could you let a shiksa like her walk right past you like that?
I mean, our people do have weakness for the shiksas. That's probably how she got in.
My theory is she told her that the last name was Green, and they let her go because they thought Green. But no, it's Greene. That's the Gentile spelling. EEN is the tribe spelling.
They probably missed that E.
They didn't check the ID. They just heard Green and they let her go.
And they let her in.
Oh, God. Anyway, here's the tweet that he's talking about. Marjorie Taylor Greene tweets, at AOC, what is the carbon footprint of the proxy war with Russia you voted to fund? This is a very good question. AOC joined the rest of the Democrats in the House in voting for the $40 billion relief package for Ukraine, which primarily consists of lethal aid and is $7 billion higher than what Biden requested.
I think their attitude, it was very Hunter Thompson with that aid package. Like what Thompson said about drugs. Once you get into a serious drug collection, the tendency is to push it all the way. I think they said once you get into a serious defense industry tax dollar giveaway habit, better. Why stop at $33 billion?
Well, they upped the ante.
Let's push it all the way. Let's push it all the way.
But you know what Birian said is true. This is a good point, and you could tell it's a good point because AOC is not one to shy away from a good Twitter fight, and she did not respond to Marjorie Taylor Greene here. This is a good point.
Yeah.
Like, look.
Well, that says it all, that she didn't respond to it because she loves getting into these.
Yeah, exactly. Like, she lives for this shit. And she didn't even bother responding.
Because what could she say?
What could she say? And look, it's a good point. I mean, on top of everything else, it's a good point. Hey, you're the one who was protesting for a Green New Deal in Nancy Pelosi's office a few years ago. Certainly, the U.S. military is one of the biggest polluters on Earth. Certainly $40 billion worth of weapons is going to undo a lot of the good that your reusable bags and paper straws have done over the past couple of years. And so do you care about this stuff or not? Now, certainly Marjorie Taylor Greene doesn't care about this stuff, so we're not saying she's any ally in the fight against, environmental disaster. But Marjorie Taylor Greene doesn't claim to be. AOC does. And not a single Democrat, not a progressive, not a squad member, nobody voted against a $40 billion weapons package to Ukraine at this moment when, oddly enough, another story that MTG put herself in the middle of, there's a baby formula shortage right now. And Marjorie Taylor Greene tied these two topics together in a speech on the floor just a couple of days ago. We're going to play that video right now, and then we're going to play the Democratic response to that in the form of Jamie Raskin. So here we go.
$40 billion, but there's no baby formula for American mothers and babies. An unknown amount of money to the CIA in the Ukraine supplemental bill, but there's no formula for American babies and mothers. Stop funding regime change and money laundering scams and U.S. politician cover-ups of their crimes in countries like Ukraine.
Madam Speaker, here's a formula for the destruction of democracy. Repeating propaganda and disinformation and appeasing imperialist assaults on sovereign nations.
In the world he lives in, that's a sick burn. But yeah, the fact that you could make Marjorie Taylor fucking Greene come off like a coffee house poet, it says it all. Yeah. There's no formula for mothers, but we got money for Ukraine. That's, you know, this is like her version of Whitey It's on the Moon. You know, she and like it, you know, it had a nice rhythm to it. You know, she had flow.
Exactly.
Flow going on. Yeah, what's left and what's right. When this fucking whack job is making more sense than this. Okay, if you just took this clip out of context, forget about who they are. Who traditionally, in terms of how we normally define this, who reads as the left winger and who reads as the right winger? Because what she's saying is a classic left wing kind of anti-war statement. And what he said is a classic right wing, you're not patriotic, red bait, throwing in Russia. I mean, we're doing the classics, man. We're bringing back fucking Bobby Darin here, man. You know, he's coming out with Russophobia and tarring any criticism as unpatriotic. This is classic old school Nixonian right wing politics, and this is like a clip of the 60s, only with the parties reversed.
Right.
Like it seems like a debate from 1965, only she's the left wing. She's hanging out with Abby Hoffman. This is where what is right? You watch Tucker Carlson, and he's like the only prominent anti-war voice in the media. What kind of a fucking left cedes that ground to Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker fucking Swanson Dinner Carlson? What kind of a left would cede that ground to them?
Well, that's what I think it is, more so than like the fact that she's making classically left arguments. I mean, yes, in the sense that she's making an anti-corruption argument and hey, we have poor people here who need help argument. Yeah, you could call that a classic left argument in a sense, although I doubt she would vote to give these mothers much help.
No, she wouldn't. She's a total hypocrite.
Milk.
She doesn't believe anything that she's saying. But they've left that field open to someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene to exploit.
Well, that's exactly right. And the second part of what I'm sort of getting at here is that, like, on the right, and you've mentioned this in the past also, there's always been a sort of like nationalist, isolationist, Pat Buchanan type strain that is anti-war from that perspective. I think that's really where she's coming from.
Rand Paul is coming out of.
That's where Rand Paul is coming out of, and I think that's kind of more where Marjorie Taylor Greene is coming out of if you were to put that clip in context. But you're absolutely right. Out of context, if you were to just look at that clip and strip all context, you would think she's the lefty and he's the right-wing war hawk. Absolutely.
Right. Well, that's typical of the whole conversation. Like yes, the difference is these right-wingers, are not really looking for peace. They're not really looking to get away from pouring all this money into the defense contractors. But hey, speaking of Rand Paul, here's another great example. Rand Paul had the head of the Department of Homeland Security and started questioning him about the disinformation ministry of truth that they're putting together, and starts laying out the truth. The government is the biggest purveyor of disinformation, and he didn't go partisan with it. He talked about George Bush and weapons of mass destruction. Wow. Where is any...
Well, the Bush team hated his father. I mean, his father was a thorn in their side when they were doing the whole Iraq war thing. And so, I think part of it is that. But also, you mentioned Rand Paul. He held up this $40 billion in the Senate. They're going to pass it eventually. It'll take a few days. But he put a halt to that process, and now they're going to have to find some procedural maneuver to pass it anyway, which they will, because it has overwhelming bipartisan support. But yeah, that's one more example. And look, bottom line is, on issues like this, I honestly don't care all that much why you take the vote you take if you take the right vote. The correct vote here was no to the $40 billion to Ukraine. So obviously, $40 billion to Ukraine, we have a baby formula shortage. A baby formula shortage. That's extremely serious. That's not like, okay, an oatmeal shortage. Like, newborns and infants who can't breastfeed are very limited as to what they can safely eat. And so if you have a formula shortage, that's an emergency. That's no joke. All right? And you have a baby formula shortage, and we're sending $40 billion. This is a lot of money, too. That's the thing. This is not $150 million, care package. $40 billion, a fuck ton of money to be sending out right now. Anybody who is even nominally on the left, are you kidding? AOC votes for this? Cori Bush votes for this? Are you kidding? There's only one reason why someone with AOC's politics would vote for this, because they don't want to take shit for voting no. That's the only reason you would ever vote for this kind of package, is because you don't want to take shit from the media. You don't want to take shit from, whatever lobbyists you're cowering to. That's the only reason why you would vote yes on this. There's no doubt in my mind, I would bet my life, that AOC knows that that was the wrong vote, and that Cori Bush and Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, I bet my life they all know it was the wrong vote. They did it because they were afraid of facing backlash if they didn't, period.
Please clap.